Designing AI from a Sikh's perspective. This comes off a research paper that I just finished writing, which links together the field of AI regulation and Sikhism, two seemingly unrelated topics, but they actually benefit each other really well in an almost symbiotic relationship. So, in this video, I'll talk you through the paper, how I went about it, my experimental methodology that I used to actually do this, the evaluations I had, and the conclusion. So, just for an overall overview, what the aim of this research paper is, or was rather, was I took four key moral tenets of Sikhism. Four of them. I researched Sikhism in depth, and those were the four ones that sort of stood out the most. Then, in the paper, I discussed how these can be transferred into AI regulatory principles. So, how can these principles, these moral frameworks, actually be tangibly converted into regulatory principles and regulatory legislation? Then I looked at each of these, I evaluated their benefit to the field of AI, and then I did an overall conclusion. And actually, I really, really enjoyed writing this article. It's probably my favorite one I've read, and the favorite one I've written, sorry. And it was just so amazing to write because it merged two of my interests in a really succinct and coherent manner. And it surprised a lot of people when I presented this. They were like, how are you going to link together AI and Sikhism? They're very unrelated. But it actually worked together really well, so I'm really excited to share this with you today. So, Sobat Dapala. This is the first key moral tenet that I looked at, and Sobat Dapala is the final phrase said at the end of the Sikh prayer Odas. Sobat Dapala literally translates to the well-being of all, or for all of humanity. And it's something that a lot of Sikh people just say, so but tapala, just to remind you and remind everyone around you that what you're doing is not only for the benefit of you, it is for the benefit of all of humanity. And all of humanity, regardless of characteristics, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. And regardless of whether, and also bearing in mind future generations. So how are we going to think about that? So then I was thinking, okay, how can this sort of be converted into AI regulation? So the first way I thought was thinking about AI bias more in depth. So I sort of thought, okay, the probabilistic nature of AI systems is meaning that some demographics are benefiting from AI more than others due to AI's ability to unintentionally reinforce stereotypes and marginalize underrepresented minorities. I think it's important to note here that it's unintentional. These AI systems weren't designed, or hopefully they weren't designed, just to perpetuate these existing stereotypes. They were designed to be beneficial, but due to their probabilistic architecture, that has been a byproduct of it. So but Dapala would probably say that AI needs to be more inclusive. It needs to benefit all of humanity and also looking out for the future of humanity. So it needs to nip those reinforced stereotypes in the bud, and it needs to provide unbiased responses that actually benefit everyone, that actually have a beneficial impact to everyone, regardless of your demographic. So, what benefit would that have to AI? I mean, obviously, it's going to make AI more useful, right? If AI is providing unbiased responses, if it's providing responses that are beneficial to all demographics rather than ones that are just more represented in the training data, then AI becomes more useful. And from that, we can build further stuff with these AI systems. It also alleviates some distrust in agentic AI systems, a large distrust of agentic AI systems or high impact AI systems in like hiring like CV screeners or medical framework or legal compliance checks, etc. These high impact areas. Therefore, through the incorporating that principle of Sabat Dapala, we actually have a beneficial impact to this. So obviously, amazing, definitely having a good impact. And yeah, now on to the next principle. The next principle is Girt Gurney. Girt Gurney translates to honest and ethical labor, and that's a key principle in Sikhism, making sure that you're earning your living and you're acting ethically and honestly. So you're not trying to mislead others, you're not trying to cause harm or malicious intent, and everything you should do should be ethical. It shouldn't be you do it to harm someone or inadvertently hurt someone per se. So, how could this be transferred into the field of AI regulation? So, it's clear that there is a big accountability gap for AI systems. I talked to quite a lot of people who are interested in AI, and one of them who I just met with today said that he was really worried about sort of AI accountability and how that impacts when we have AI having such a profound impact on our day-to-day lives. So, how can this be applied to the ethics of AI? How can it only be applied to AI regulation? It would say accountability. And the principle of accountability in AI regulation and religion are not actually novel. This isn't a novel link. There's actually a pretty strong link between the two. Notably so, there was a big AI and faith conference called the Rome Call of AI, where the three Abrahamic religions actually met to discuss faith, the future of AI, and how those intertwine and affect each other. And one of the six principles that they actually sort of came up with in that conference was accountability. They placed a heavy emphasis on the fact that accountability needs to be implemented for there to be ethical AI. Why? Well, that's evaluating the impact, right? It's trust. It stems from that principle of public trust, okay? Because if you're having public trust, if you're having accountable AI, someone who actually is accountable for all these decisions that AI might be making, people are just more inclined to use AI. They're more inclined to trust AI, they're more inclined to innovate with AI, and then that will in turn spur further advancements. So Gurney definitely has a beneficial outcome as well to the field of AI in the future. The next principle we're going to look at is Vanshako or Vangeshakana. This literally translates to sharing and equity and is another key principle in Sikhism which comes in the form of langar, which is the free communal kitchen in Gurdwaras, which is the Sikhs' place of worship. That's probably the embodiment of Vanshako or Vangeshakana, and that's just something that is so deeply intertwined with Sikhism at its core. Sikhi at its core has a lot of emphasis on sharing and that principle of equity as well, not equality but equity. So, how would that be implemented to the field of AI regulation? Definitely, definitely two ways. Two ways that it really, really clearly applies. The first one is on the PowerPoint side there, AI inequalities. Currently, there's global inequalities. There are. There are. That's just a fact. There's global inequalities, but due to that, there's also inequalities of who can access the internet, and there's inequalities of who can access artificial intelligence systems. And I think Van Schako would make the argument that everyone needs to be have the opportunity to have that AI access because of AI's transformative impact and the ability to spur innovation and accelerate impact and improve efficiency. It would definitely say that that needs to be open. And open takes me on to the second one, which is open source artificial intelligence. If you don't know, open sourcing artificial intelligence essentially just means that AI models are they're free to look at their internal mechanisms. Looking at their weights, that's a key one. You can often download open source models. They're often free to use on a platform like Hugging Face or other AI platforms. So open sourcing AIs can sometimes have really good impacts because it means that innovation can occur throughout the international community simultaneously rather than only the developers of Google DeepMind being able to work on Gemini models, for example. Now everyone in the world can work on Gemini models because they're open source, and everyone can work on them because of the open license that they would have. So I think that would be a key thing that the principle of Van Schuckel would argue is necessary for ethical AI regulation. So those are the two ones: open sourcing and making sure that AI access is equitably distributed around the world and around the international community. So obviously that's going to benefit everyone and foster that community of growth because AI is it's a very large and a pretty divided and opinionated space. But through enabling everyone to have that opinion, to be able to contribute to the space themselves, and then also having high quality contributions through these open source models, it sort of just all grows together and it just fosters that sense of innovation. The final principle that I looked at and analysed was the principle of Naam Japna or Naam Japo. Now this does literally translate in Sikhism or Sikhi in Punjabi rather to remembering God. For this research paper, I sort of translated it to remembering truth, so embodying that principle of truth. So how would this be applied to AI regulation? Well, it's on the screen. There's three key ways: transparency, traceability, and explainability. They all end in Y's, and they are often three very closely related but distinct and abstract concepts in the field of AI regulation, and they're very, very easily confused. So let me give you a brief rundown. Transparency. That is how we can understand how AI systems work. We can understand how they work. That's transparency. So it's transparent. It's almost like their mechanisms are transparent, so we can see that's how it works. Traceability. Traceability is that the AI we can trace, or the AI can trace its steps. So before some LLM like ChatGPT just spitting out an output, you can actually look inside and you can trace it and you can say, okay, so you got to this output from here, which gave you this information, which led you to believe this, which is why you said this. So we can just trace these data points of these information in the model to how it got to its output. Finally, explainability. Now, again, really closely linked. Explainability is in the word though. It's that the AI model can explain how it got to its outcome, which sort of emerges. It's sort of like almost advanced traceability in a way, because then it explains its data points and what it led to believe, maybe taking into account like the validity of each of these sources or something. So those are the three key principles that Nam Jumbo would want to extrapolate for the future. Now, if implemented in AI regulation and AI regulatory text, what impact would that have? Explainable AI, as you can see on sort of the diagram there, is AI that explains itself. We can understand it, we can trace it, and that just means it's so much more trustworthy. It relates to that principle earlier of being actually able to use AI in those high impact areas. Because then, if you're using AI in a legal case, I wouldn't be worried about the AI hallucinating because I can look and I can trace and I can follow it up and it explains itself. And if I wanted to, as a human in the loop sort of mechanism, I could then go back and I could look and I could validate it, but it would still probably be quicker. So still enhancing that principle of efficiency. Human centric is also really important in AI regulation, and that's actually something that the Rome Call of AI, that event with the three Abrahamic religious leaders, they actually talked about that a lot. That importance of AI regulation being human centric, centered around humans. Now, that was the last principle I looked at. Then I wrote an overall conclusion. Okay, so what have we learned from this experimental approach? Because this approach, in a nutshell, has been taking Sikhism as a moral framework and then using that to inspire AI regulatory principles or AI legislative text. So we've analyzed each of these tenets, and I analyzed each of these tenets in more detail in the paper. And it really gained me to have a more proficient and profound understanding of Sikhism and how it relates in our day-to-day life. Because these are two ultimately pretty abstract concepts. You don't see a lot of things online trying to link Sikhism and AI or another religion and AI. And it's worth noting that for this experimental methodology, I've chosen Sikhism, and I think the moral values and the moral frameworks of Sikhism really relate to AI regulation, so it makes that comparison slightly easier. And the last thing I want to note, which is what actually inspired a lot of this, is this. Religions have had decades, centuries, and sometimes even millennia to carefully deliberate and debate over their moral principles, their moral frameworks. AI has not been around for that long. Uh, and the high impact AI, and I mean the sort of public knowledge of AI per se, large language models, has not even been around for a decade. Yeah, so think about all of the knowledge and all of the nuanced proficiency we could gain if we sort of use some of the benefits of these frameworks and put it into the field of AI regulation. It's something to think about, and it's something that I'd persuade you to think about. Something to think about in the future, definitely. Who knows how they impact each other? And this is only one approach, and hopefully there will be more others. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you very much, and please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. That's it.